or a bid to improve trade ties between the world's top two superpowers. China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang has held a phone call with his U.S. counterpart, Antony Blinken, amid growing unease over issues such as Taiwan trade and national security. Mr. Qin asked the U.S. to stop interfering in China's internal affairs, emphasizing that Washington must work with Beijing to stabilise bilateral relations. China's top diplomat also urged the U.S. to respect its core interests. These include the Taiwan issue, as well as China's sovereignty, security and development interests. He added a thinly veiled remark, saying it was clear who was responsible for the tension in their ties, which have been facing new difficulties and challenges. Mr. Blinken, meanwhile, painted a less pointed picture of this exchange, reiterating a similar stance on stabilising relations. He said both sides discussed ongoing efforts to maintain open lines of communication to avoid miscalculation and conflict. This call comes out of a possible visit by Mr. Blinken to China. And for more, CNA's Lo Minmin joins us live from Shanghai. Minmin, this phone call comes after reports of Mr. Blinken's trip to China that is expected to happen at the end of this week. What does that signal for relations between these two superpowers?
These calls are typically precursors to actual visits, but the thing is, neither the US nor China have officially confirmed that Blinken is indeed going to visit this Sunday. Clearly, both countries are erring on the side of caution because who knows what could happen in the next few days before Sunday comes around. We are in such a tense moment in history where even a small scuffle could have the potential of blowing up into a huge diplomatic incident that would make it impossible for Blinken to visit China. And that was precisely what happened in February when Blinken's trip to China was cancelled after the shoot down of that alleged Chinese spy balloon that flew over US territory. Now, worth noting that the Chinese readout of this phone call between Qin Gang and Antony Blinken was much more pointed than the US version of the readout. And that really underscores the underlying distrust that Beijing still feels towards Washington. The Chinese statement was also clear in pointing out that Qin Gang had picked up the phone to speak to Blinken at the request of the U.S. This was clearly language that's inserted to position China as the party who is willing to cooperate with the U.S. and meet the U.S. halfway, while the U.S. is the one responsible for the worsening relations.
Minmin, given your reading of these two slightly differing statements, should Mr. Blinken actually pay that visit to China at the end of this week? What are the expectations from this visit?
Well, Blinken would then be the highest level American official to visit China since 2018, when then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited China. This will be a show of commitment from both countries that they could take steps to thaw relations. And it would be a win for Washington if they can use this trip to reassure their European allies that they are able to manage this Chinese relationship delicately. But here in China, the expectations for any concrete outcome from this trip is very, very low, because there is a predominant view among the Chinese that America is playing a double game here of trying to create this illusion of wanting to communicate with China, but at the same time repeatedly testing and provoking China's fundamental principles. The latest geopolitical flare-up is that China is trying to build more eavesdropping facility in Cuba, just over 100 kilometers away from Florida. China and Cuba have both denied this, but U.S. insists it's been going on for years. So this doesn't set the stage for a very warm welcome for Blinken when he visits, but it's hoped that with this in-person meeting, both countries could at least agree to dial down tensions on all fronts and restart regular high-level channels of communication.
Thanks for that, Minmin. Should this visit happen, I'm sure we will be speaking to you again. Lo Minmin speaking live to us there from Shanghai.